she was asked that if she would deliver a male child, and she thought that would give her respect in her family, or a place in her husband's family. Because of multiple pregnancies, their cervix, the mouth of the uterus, is torn, and chances of cervical cancer is more, chances of pelvic inflammation is more. The uterus itself comes out from the vagina, is hanging in between the legs, which is called prolapse of uterus. Anybody can bleed 5 liters of blood within 5 minutes if uterus does not contract.
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Dr. Aruna Kalra, who's an eminent and renowned obstetrician, gynecologist, and robotic as well as laparoscopic surgeon with a vast experience of more than 23 years. She strongly believes in patient centric care and therefore a strong advocate for minimally invasive and scarless surgeries. She's an expert in scarless laparoscopic surgeries and is becoming a formidable name in the latest robo assisted surgical techniques. With extensive experience in her field, Dr. Kalra authored I Want a Boy, which is a topic and the name of the book that really got me absolutely hooked to this. This is a powerful exploration of gender bias and the societal pressures surrounding the birth of female children. Her book reveals the harsh realities faced by women due to entrenched cultural preferences for male heirs. Beyond her writing, Dr. Kalra is dedicated to advocating for gender equality, integrating her commitment into both her clinical practice and public discourse. Her work continues to inspire and drive change in the realm of women's rights, and that's the reason I'm extremely honored today to have you, Aruna, with us. So, the first question that I want to ask you, your book, I Want a Boy, explores the extreme lengths to which some families will go to ensure that they have a male child. Can you start by telling us what inspired you to write this book? Was it personal? Was it because of the number of people that you met, because of your career? What made you write this book?
So, good morning, and thank you very much, Mahua, for having me on your show. And I would start with your this question, like, without wasting any time. Because as a gynecologist and obstetrician, I was, as soon as I entered my post graduation training, I was witnessing these female patients who were coming, and when we were delivering them in labor room, this was really unexpected and surprise factor for me. When they would deliver a girl child, they would either not look at them, or their attendants would not give them food or change of clothes, and they would come and abuse in the ward that she has delivered a girl child again, and it was a daily occurrence. And one thing this, and then when we were in septic abortion ward, there were girls who were going repeated abortions, from like, the quack would do the abortion at around 12 weeks or 16 weeks after illegally detecting that it is a female child, and then they were coming with septic abortions, bleeding, or rupture of uterus. And we were kind of treating them, but the background of the story was like they were going through these repeated abortions or repeated pregnancies or deliveries, die handled deliveries at with quacks. And that's how every day I was facing, witnessing, and I started writing these on in my diary. And in my personal life, when being a doctor, I was a doctor, and when I also delivered my first child, who was a girl, uh, uh, the same thing I faced, and I was surprised that even educated people could behave like that. They would also not welcome their first child if it is a female child or second child or whatever. So I never expected that kind of reaction. But even my family reacted the same way. And that was the time I thought that I am more different. I was advocating, I was teaching, preaching them. But then I thought that who am I? I'm also suffering the same fate.
I so agree with you, Aruna, because I was raised as a single child, among parents who are extremely well read. And the bias is so strong, about how there are times when they say that, I have a male child. And it's not this that I do not want a girl child or a male child. I think I did not even think about it. But the kind of affection and the kind of relief they had when I had a male child, especially for my mother, So I think a lot of women are very, very patriarchal, much more than what the men are. And I think they do carry forth this entire, conversation, or this entire narrative of of having the male heir. So, my next question to you is this, that your book is both a personal and professional exploration of gender bias. How did you approach blending your medical experiences with your personal reflections in I Want a Boy?
Uh, s- so, because I was a victim as well as witness to these things, uh, and I could actually feel the kinship, the sisterhood with my patients. So when they would come and they were delivering sixth child or seventh or eighth child, I could see that they were anemic. I could see that their uterus will not be able to contract and they might need blood transfusion, or they were malnourished, or sometimes they did not know about preventive health checkups like pap smear to prevent cervical cancer, which because of repeated pregnancies and abortion, they were suffering for pelvic inflammatory diseases, cervical cancer, anemia, and they didn't have any choice for contraception. So my medical expertise, I could actually blend and I could teach them, preach them. I could take care of them at a very personal and emotional level also. I could understand when a patient would come to me, sit in front of me, and while telling her clinical symptoms, would start crying because her husband was telling that he would marry another female because she could not deliver a male child, or her girls were not given proper education, and they would be given proper education or the respect or the love only if she would deliver a male child. Eventually only then they would be given. So all these things, because I was victim myself, not to that extent, but I could actually I could feel their pain, and I had experience and clinical knowledge to correct many of their ailments with my clinical knowledge. So that's how I could blend my clinical expertise. And that emotional level connect was too much. That sisterhood feeling, which I was feeling, that I could treat them, I could do something for them. That was
Kudos, Dr. Aruna. And I think majority of women face this, whether they are cognitive about it or not. I don't know, but there is a very systematic harassment, a systematic approach of telling that you're not enough, and so you're not the only one. If I could call myself a victim, yes, so have I had tremendous gender biases that I've faced through my life. And it's only now that I think there's been so much of conversation. There is there is social media that is really at the availability of on your mobile phones, and one is learning a lot more about what is right and what is wrong. So kudos again to you, Dr. Aruna. Now, you know what? You've gone through a lot of harrowing stories, in your book. So can you tell me one, especially for our listeners, which is the one that stands out the most to you, and why does it touch you the most?
okay. So there's a story, Arifa's story. So this nursing's girl who was in the government hospital. So we had the shift duties, and she's a very calm person, very mature. She was in her early 20s only, and she had she has two daughters, like had two daughters, and she would be actually gliding from bed to bed, tending patients, and with like dutifully she would do her duty, and she was happy, but very minimal words, introvert, very few words. And I found her really mature for her age. I was also in my early 30s at that point of time. So when after 6 months posting, I met her. No, I went to her ward. I thought that I would meet her and we had good connect, but I could not find her. And the nurse, her colleague, told me that she is no more, and it choked my heart. I was like, how could it happen? Like just few months back, 6 months back, I saw her, And this nurse, her friend, told the whole story, that how she was a nursing student here, how this fellow who was of different religion was after her beauty. I always thought she was a Persian beauty, but she was a Sikh, only child of her parents. And because this fellow, anyway, she got married to this fellow who was uneducated, not employed, had a very big family in near Jama Masjid. And he like after marrying her, like, she delivered two daughters, and she was not respected because one, she was out of religion, another, she was delivering girl child one after another. She was asked that if she would deliver a male child, and she thought that would give her respect in her family, or a place in her husband's family. And her husband was, anyway, after few romantic years, he was also the same. So she was earning, she had a house, also flat. She was getting her possession in few months. But at the same time, she did not tell me that she was pregnant again, third time, when in her notes, and she had delivered second child in the hospital, where her uterus was torn, her placenta was low lying, which is called placenta previa. It was sutured very like with difficulty, and the head of the department had told her not to conceive again. She was asked that sterilization to be done, but she refused. Her husband did not sign, and she also refused other for whatever consequences she thought. And see, she is a nurse. She knew everything. She has seen death on table happening because of rupture of uterus, because of excessive blood loss. But still, she went through that. She loved her both the girls. Her both the girls were in English medium school. She was so proud of that, and she knew that once she is gone from this world, her girls would not be taken care of. But still, she went for third pregnancy, third delivery, and this time, because she knew that here in this hospital somebody would question, or her in-laws said that no, she should not come here. She was delivered in a nursing home where there was no blood bank facilities. Her and over and above, after two cesareans, she was asked to deliver normally vaginally. That's like uh, because of all these things, she actually died on table in in that nursing home. There was no blood bank. Her uterus was tattered, could not suture. They could not suture her uterus, placenta previa above that. I could, and then this husband got possession of that flat. He withdrew the girls from their school, and the parents, like their grandparents, were not allowed to see their daughter's children. Now he has two daughters, a son, a house, and a pension coming from that girl, Arifa. And I was actually, it was really bad. I could not stop my tears. I could not stand there for any minute. I knew Arifa. Still today, I feel that she's around, and I want to scold her, slap her badly. Why did she do this to her life as well as her kids' life?
So, how does the preference for male children affect the healthcare system, and the treatment women receive during childbirth?
So, see, healthcare system, if we talk about in government hospitals, and I'm talking about everywhere, whether it's Delhi, other states, everywhere, wherever I've worked, UP, it's like overloaded, it's overfilling. We see patients, hundreds of patients in OPD, and then the wards are full. Labor room is as such, like, you would find as if it is a factory. Nobody knows, like, it's just tuck 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 tuck, deliveries are happening. Some deliveries are catched by dais or ayas. Some interns are catching, because it's like it's ongoing. In one shift, 9 to 4, we are delivering hundreds of deliveries. So how much personal care anybody can get? They are just coming and delivering. As if I, in government hospital, I used to ask them, do you start from first pregnancy, or it always starts from third or fourth? Because that's how the condition is. uh, we should be like, in government hospital, there should be a systematic uh, manner, which it's not possible with such a load. Preventive healthcare should be there. Contraceptive methods should be taught, or at least uh, uh, if they say, if we do not educate it, if we won't tell them, they do not know that copper T or loop is there, and everybody relates that, okay, every contraceptive has some or the other side effect. Okay, so if they loop is used to them, they would say that they would either obesity or they are falling sick again and again because of loop. So we have to educate them. We have to educate that repeated pregnancies or septic abortions and healthcare system, this is one. If you go a little outwards, like outskirts, we have many mushrooming of nursing homes, which are not run by doctors. They are quacks. They are doing ultrasound uh, to detect whether it's a boy or a girl, and then they are conducting these female feticides, which is after 12 weeks. It is very risky. And then, because they do not even have knowledge how to do it, they were either nurses or dais or some worker in the hospital learned something. And you would not believe, in my town, when I opened a small nursing home, there were 20 other nursing homes which were run by all these untrained dais and nurses. I could not run my hospital because I was maintaining sterility and everything, and they were doing everything without it. So healthcare system, either we are not able to provide full like doctors and the healthcare system to each and every person of our population. That is why there's mushrooming of quack nursing home run by quacks, and that is why there's septic abortions and deliveries by dice and complications which we handle in tertiary care system.
So, Dr. Aruna, there, how do frequent abortions and multiple pregnancies affect women's health, and what are some of the health risks that are involved?
So, see, multiple pregnancies, before they have gained their hemoglobin back, iron deficiencies, their multivitamin deficiencies, their calcium deficiencies, they are osteoporotic, osteopenia, and because of multiple pregnancies, their cervix, the mouth of the uterus is torn, and chances of cervical cancer is more, chances of pelvic inflammation is more. They are suffering from stress urinary incontinence, like urine dribbles out because of weak perineal muscles. The uterus itself comes out from the vagina, is hanging in between the legs, which is called prolapse of uterus. So all these hazards are there. They are, and if we are like repeatedly, if we are getting pregnant, our uterus is so lax that during delivery or post delivery, it is not able to contract to control the bleeding. And by multiple, after multiple births, if she is delivered, say, 10th child or 11th child, uterus would not contract and she would die of postpartum hemorrhage. And that's what happened to Taj Mahal. So Mumtaz Mahal died while she was delivering her 14th child. She was died of postpartum hemorrhage. That's what happened to Smita Patil. So she also died of atonic BPH. Well, she was like, anybody can bleed 5 liters of blood within 5 minutes if uterus does not contract. So this is such a unexpected event which could happen to first time mothers also, and after multiple childbirth, it is absolutely there, it is bound to happen, because the uterus anemia is there, so uterus is not able to contract.
And so many of our grandmothers in the earlier generation had 11 children, 12 children. I am, my father were 11 children. And I think her entire life for my grandmother, my dadi, went by in just, having one child after the other till her entire youth was gone, just producing child after child. Yeah. So, your book also highlights socio-economic factors influencing gender preferences. So, how do how do different socio-economic classes, in India approach this issue of preferring male children? Do you think it is, class agnostic? And according to me, I think it's class agnostic, and most people prefer subconsciously a male child because they like the idea of a male child taking over the family business. They like the idea of a male child being the heir. They like the idea of the male child doing the last rites for them. So, what is your opinion on this?
Right? Absolutely right, Noah. It is like this, that uneducated or people who do not have money, they would also have that desire to have a male child. It is like some precious thing which everybody should have. So they would keep delivering one after another because they don't have means to detect whether it's male or female, and sometimes they believe that it's wrong. Yes, definitely it is wrong. So they would keep delivering until their wife's health is gone and she is dying of anemia or some other. But the other population which can afford would be very clear about it, that see, I'm an educated girl. I do not want to deliver one after another. If I have to deliver another, and if my family is preferring male, which is definitely because of hair and everything, let's do selective selection. Either selective sperm selection, male sperm should be instilled with the help of IUI, or let's make a male embryo, engineered male embryo, and have male embryo transferred to your womb and have IVF pregnancy. If it is not allowed in India, which is crime here, then let's go to other countries, because when we can afford 20-25 lakhs and we can do that, let's do that. At least we are not doing this heinous crime of female feticide. We're just preferring a male child, which is our uh, uh, which everybody has wish, and which we can afford to have. So there's very simple and very clear this thing, why we cannot do, and what's wrong with having a male child or wanting a male child and getting with simple means as IVF. So they have their own explanation and everything to it around it.
You also touch on the aversion, to female children being rooted in societal fears, for their safety. So, can you expand really on this perspective of yours?
So we know that what happened in Calcutta, this rape case, and uh, when we wear white coat, we know that we are safe, we are secure, and whatever patient would come. So if I'm a dermatologist and a male patient would come with some sexually diseases on her penis or scrotum, would I not treat her well? Whether I should be scared or I should feel awkward to treat him? No, I'm a doctor. I should always be treating a male patient also with the same empathy. And uh, but if a doctor can also be raped, any other girl can be. So in my story, when I was writing my medical college journey and all, twice or thrice I have mentioned that while we were commuting from college to city, those boys would come on the bike and they would slap on the back or squeeze the chest when we were on rickshaw, and we could not do anything. And the same.
Absolutely.
And when I went to this professor, I was just 17. I had that scabies, and professor told me to come to his house clinic. There was nobody, and I went with my roommate, and he actually felt my back and felt my curves when he knew that scabies cannot be there on the back, and that in my first year I did not know. He knew that it is only on in between the fingers or elbow or front, but he still asked me to remove my clothes and stand, and he would want to see my back as well, and he touched and felt it. So after in my final year, I got to know that scabies never it spreads to back. So I don't know. So these are the fears which we face. And another incident I wrote here, that when my batchmate's 40 years old brother came, and I was absolutely clueless. I've never, I was like, car was a new thing for me, and he asked me that, okay, let's go buy a car and get something. I jumped in, and I was absolutely, I had no clue what is happening to me, because again, a 17-year-old girl who has never felt that somebody is touching uh, in all darkness. So we are scared as parents. As soon as girl is born, we are scared of her safety. Nowadays, we are scared of our boys also, because see, for the same reason, they can also be abused and trafficked. But so safety for girls, whether it's under the burqa, or it's 2 years old girl or a 4-year-old girl, we are so as a, I think as a uh, b- nation. We should provide security to them. The law should be really strong. Like in many states, I hear that girls say that they can roam around at 2 p.m. also at night, 2 a.m. also. I think this kind of security and law, if it is there, and if upfront somebody is not asking for dowry, that dowry कि आप कितने करोड़ लगाओगे, how many crores are you going to spend on your daughter's wedding. All these things, if they are corrected, many people would definitely want to have girls because they are definitely good, better than boys.
They are better caretakers and caregivers for sure, you know.
You
Uh,
are.
So, yeah, so is it true that many, major publishers actually initially rejected your manuscript? What was their feedback, and how did you overcome these challenges? I mean, it is a very, very rebellious title. So tell me a little bit about that.
So I think it's a part of the process now. I feel, because when I went to, and I thought it's a good topic, and many major publishers should come forward, and so that the book is seen and heard, and the it can be the message can be spread through their big names. But the answers were, this is not our bandwidth, and this is not scalable, and the stories are very sad, and these are not saleable, or we don't have audience for these kind of stories. So it was heartbreaking, and then I would go back and say, okay, Harry Potter's author also had so many rejection, and I was always thinking someday there would be. I wanted a traditional publisher only. I didn't want to self-publish it. I thought, because see, I was not publishing it for the sake of publishing. These stories I started writing in 2000, and it's 2024 now. I thought when I'll compile and publish, by that time this would be a gone thing. That female feticide or preference for female. I thought people would say that, okay, once upon a time it used to happen. Now it's not the same story. But after 24 years, also story is the same. Newspapers are full of rape cases or female feticide or everything. So I thought if a traditional publisher would come, it would be able to give voice to it or spread the message more effectively. So yes, there were rejection, and because it is not, I'm not an author. I just wrote my stories, which was in my diary, and I thought this should be shown to the world, and world should know about this thing. As you said, that there's so many things in a female's life which they would do not talk about it because of so many things, like we do not want to, our family should not get affected, or nobody should feel bad. So we don't do that. But this is a
I only so the family is actually on us, Aruna. Men are just, allowed to go scot free. Yeah. So, how do you incorporate your commitment to women's rights in your work?
so when see, when I see all these females, first thing which, whenever I treat any patient, and especially when they are suffering from this kind of societal pressure, uh, now uh, I'm not judgmental at all, first thing. So I hear them, I give them full attention, and I try to understand what's going on. How can we change this thing, or how can I help them uh, uh, stand strong on their feet? One, uh, I talk to their families, I try to give them psychological support. Uh, and the clinical whatever expertise. Another thing is, I run a very small clinic which is like for underprivileged, and these on Tuesdays. So there also I try that if somebody is suffering from, and if a girl is out of love or whatever, she got pregnant and she does not want to continue, or the young girls who have no knowledge about contraception, or mothers who are not able to conceive. So all these things, but a little small, whatever I can give to society. I have started my clinic. This is free clinic, and I try to advocate, and with few NGOs, many of my friends are running. Uh, I direct them so that they can have good medical care, and whatever little we can do. Sometimes in one of the story I have written that there was a female it was her second marriage, and her first son, 4 years old, was not taken care of. Uh, so uh, and she was again out, like she her husband threw her after the after he had his son. So I try to make these female more independent and introduce them to NGOs, so that they are so because I these patients would come to me. It's whatever little I can do, and from my pool of patients, I just try to help them.
Wonderful, wonderful, Dr. Aruna. So, Aruna, what advice would you give to individuals, who want to take a stand against gender discrimination in their own communities?
Okay, so first thing is that you would agree that it's like if I ask even as each and every person, even if they say that their families are educated and modern and everything, but when I asked that, and after reading my book, many of my patients reverted back, messaged me that when they delivered a second child, they were greeted like, okay, doesn't matter, girls are better, it's okay. Nowadays boys and girls are same. So I was like, this is not consolation, this is not like this is not wish, this is like you are just comforting, consoling them. So even if they were modern, as you said that if you when you delivered a boy, they said okay, they were happy that okay, at least uh, first child boy, it's all good. Second child, if it is girl, okay, it can be accepted. So, but if first is girl and second is also girl, so even in modern societies, so first thing is a change of orthodox mindset. Okay, if your mother, mother-in-law, sister, everybody has the same kind of mindset, and it is there. It is actually prevalent in our society. So we should be advocating ourselves. We should be educating our girls. We should give them education. We should ask them to have their own vocation. They should earn money. They should have their voice. They should not be waiting for a Prince Charming. They should be standing on their own feet. We have so many examples of females who are standing on their own feet, and they are able to advocate themselves. So, and boys also should be sensitized at in our houses. When boy and girl are fighting, you should not be taking side of a boy even if he is wrong, or you should not be expecting a girl or your daughter should be giving food to your son. So both should be treated equally. So this should come from within in the family. uh, and we should teach boys in school, sensitize them about that these are equal, boys and girls are equal and everything. So I think from very basic training, from the it should start from home itself. uh, I think that's what is required, and then nationwide, definitely security is one thing, law enforcement is another thing.
So, any advice you want to give to couples, who are beginning to plan for pregnancy?
So nowadays scenario has absolutely changed. I have written in my book also that diabetes was unheard of, gestational diabetes in my previous practice when I was undergraduate or postgraduate. Now lifestyle disorders are these are the diseases which are affecting female fertility and complications during pregnancy. So I would tell them that if they are planning for conception, go for pre-conception counseling. Their weight or BMI should be within optimum range. They should stop smoking. They should be maintaining a healthy, disciplined exercise routine and less of screen time. These are one thing. And in preconception counseling, we do few tests to check whether they have any comorbidities, like they are already prone for diabetes, they have PCOS, they have some kind of endometriosis or thalassemia. Both couples have, both husband and wife have thalassemia. So if they have any pelvic infection, we should be treating them. They should we should start them, start folic acid or vitamins for them, and once they are in good health, they should plan for pregnancy. And some couples who are not planning in their 30s, they should go and check whether we can preserve their fertility in their young age 30s, so that they are able to have children even in their 40s, but those eggs would be younger, like 30 years old. So this is my message, that please, these lifestyle disorders, PCOS and all, are going to affect your health and your fertility. Please beware of it. You should have a very healthy lifestyle for yourself and for your healthy pregnancy.
So, Dr. Aruna, what message do you hope the readers should take away from I Want a Boy?
From this book, because I wanted the world to know that there are females who are suffering from the societal pressure. They are delivering repeatedly and they are abused by repeated abortions and repeated pregnancies. Wherever you feel that this kind of orthodox mindset is there, if you can preach them, if you can help these females, if you can provide them some care. Don't be judgmental, because these females are suffering, and this can be you also. This can be your friend who's well educated, who's in good modern society. And please, no, don't be judgmental because they are forced to do all those things. Try to provide some support to them. Try to provide some NGO support to them. And we can end this if every girl would stand for it. If my mother would stand for my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and we all are joined together and voice this heinous crime, and we should stop this against us. This is against us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aruna, for being on today's episode. And we wish you all the best with the book, I Want a Boy. It is a book that is a must read for every listener who's listening to us right now. And more books and more good work that you are continuing. And lots of love and support to the sisterhood, Dr. Aruna.
Thank you very much, and all the best for your book also. I'm looking forward to read your book.
Yeah, I will send the copy to you in your home address, with my name and with an absolute a letter, maybe a note of gratitude and honor to have you on my show.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mawa.
Thank you.